Today, we will be looking at one of my more requested topics by completing the contract, conduct a focused observational survey of Kerbin, all requiring us to get a vessel into the upper atmosphere above a specific waypoint. In fact, I'll be looking at 3 very different ways to get the job done, and as these contracts tend to spawn early in a career game, I will only be using vessels that can be built while you are still low on the tech tree. Let's get started. As always, we'll start by taking a look at the contract, conduct a focused observational survey of Kerbin, and the objective here is to take a crew report at a flight above 18,700 meters near Pilot Surprise. So we're going to emphasize here on the above part. This number is always in around the 18 kilometer, 19 kilometer range. So make sure you have a vessel that is capable of getting to that altitude. Note as well how much above can be any distance above, including being in space. We'll take advantage of that a little later in the video. Yes, we are going to do multiple ones of these, each emphasizing a different technique to bang off this contract. If we take a look at the other contracts, we can see they are very similar to each other, all requiring us to get to altitudes above the 17, 18, 19 kilometer range. However, they do differ in what you are required to do once you are there. 2 of mine require me to do a crew report, and 1 requires a temperature scan. As always, read the contracts carefully and make sure to have the necessary equipment aboard. All of the missions you're going to see today can be done with Tier 1 buildings. Now, I do have a couple of Tier 2 buildings. I do have a Tier 2 astronaut complex, and because it makes my life so much easier, I do have a Tier 2 tracking station as well. But I want people to know that all of the missions you're going to be seeing can be done with just Tier 1 buildings. As far as the technology that's involved, you need to get all of the first few tiers done, and in the last tier, you do need these 3. You need basic science, you need to have aviation, and you need to have advanced rocketry, and that will do all the vessels that you're going to see in this video. And with that, let's get started with our first vessel. As I always kind of like to do because it saves us a lot of time, we're going to start by modifying an old build. This is from Mission 5. This is the airplane where I was just doing a basic airplane tutorial. This is a short range, low tier plane, and we're simply going to modify it so that it can get up to an altitude of 18 kilometers. Now, the only jet engines I have unlocked to this date are the J-20 Juno basic jet engines. No hope at all of them getting to that kind of an altitude. You need to get actually some pretty advanced jet engines in order to do that. So we're not going to go with jet engines. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to remove this, and we're going to simply stick on a hammer, an RT-10 hammer SRB. We're going to stick this at the back, and that is going to get us easily up to the altitude that's required. Now, we do want to still make this something that can fly, so let's, I'm going to stick this temporarily at the back. I want to keep the science on this thing. It's not necessary, but you may find yourself getting yourself over new biomes that you may want to collect some science in. If you want to take all this science off, you certainly can. Definitely want our rudder still, so I'm going to stick that there at the back. And then we can throw away our tail part. So there is our new plane right there. Let's actually slide. Just looks a little funny. I'm going to slide that rudder. But I have most certainly affected the mass distribution of this thing, so we're going to put on our center of mass and our center of lift. And just a very quick reminder that you want to have the center of lift just barely behind the center of mass. If you want this spoken of in detail, make sure to check out the video in which I built this thing, where I talk about not only balancing the plane, but also tweaking the control surfaces so that you can end up producing something that you can fly easily. These have been turned down, so again, check that video out for all of those kind of details. Another thing you want to take a look at is where these rear landing gear are. You want them to be a little bit behind the center mass. This one is definitely too close. This might be a little bit back heavy, which is not surprising. Got a great big engine sitting here at the back, so We're going to just slide these landing gear back just a little bit. You do want to definitely take a look at your staging. I don't want all these engines coming on at the same time. We're going to start on our regular jet engines that we had before, and then we're only going to kick on our SRB when we are ready to go up to our altitude. Because remember, in SRB, once you've used up the fuel, it's used. So this is a one-shot deal. So if you have more than one of these contracts, you'll have to launch more than one of these planes. The other thing you want to take a look at is the thrust to weight ratio. It has a thrust to weight ratio right now of 3.02. That's even in the atmosphere, and we're going to be higher up in the atmosphere. We'll probably be at an altitude of about 5 kilometers. So if we turn this up to 5 kilometers, you can see our thrust to weight's now gone up to 3.27, and as this thing loses mass, its weight's going to go down, its acceleration is going to go up. So by the time we get to the end of this burn, the thrust to weight ratio could be significantly higher than that. So I definitely want to tweak down the thrust to weight ratio anywhere around, I don't know, 1.5, 1.6, 1.58, that's fine. It doesn't have to be particularly precise. But basically, this is it. This is now our high altitude jet. So let's put in a pilot and do this thing. And we're going to go into map view here, and this plane doesn't have the greatest of ranges. So you want to pick a mission where this isn't too far away. Here's the KSC, here's our thing. So sort of on the same continent. Look at how do you do one where they are over on the other side of the planet very shortly. But what we need to do right now is simply click on that and hit activate navigation. That will put a waypoint on our nav ball that we'll see once we are pointed in the right direction. But we can see we need to go kind of north and a little bit to the west already. Other than that, we're going to put on SAS. We're going to put our throttle up. I like to change my view to free for this mission. There we go. Brakes off. And we're going to punch it. And we're starting to pick up some speed going down the runway. And once I get in around 50 meters per second, we're going to start pitching up just a little bit, get ourselves off there. Oh, this thing lifts off very, very easily. And again, we're going to go towards the north. Now, this is not... Again, these Juno engines are not super powerful, so watch your speed. We've added a lot of mass to this thing. Make sure you do not let your speed drop too drastically, or else this plane will stall. And you can see here our waypoint, so we're just going to put it right towards the waypoint, and we're going to head off in that direction there. Now, one thing you want to do is you want to get as much altitude as you can out of these jet engines. So what you want to do is keep increasing your altitude, but as you're increasing your altitude, watch your speed. If your speed is starting to drop, make sure that you pitch down to keep your speed increasing. Again, we're not talking about powerful engines. If you point yourself straight up and go, this thing's going to stall out for sure. And watch the vertical speed indicator here. It is useful. We don't want this to go down below 0. So, slight, slow increase in vertical speed. We're increasing, I don't know, 7-8 meters per second. That's good. And when you're looking at this on the nav ball, don't point straight at this waypoint marker. Again, that will stall out the plane. Our goal is simply to get underneath it. And as we get closer and closer to it, we'll be seeing this going up towards the top of the nav ball as we come underneath it. Don't worry about that part. And once we are in range of our waypoint, you'll see that icon begin to flash, and we'll get a message up at the top just underneath the altimeter telling us that we are there. Oh, we are getting pretty close now. You are entering pilot surprise. Alright, so now I'm going to pitch up and I'm going to hit there, and I'm just going straight up. This is my only goal. I'm going to go straight up here. Like that. In fact, at this point, if I want to, I can simply lock it onto the prograde vector. Not quite straight up, but that's okay. You don't want to come out of the range here. You can see here our apoapsis climbing rapidly. We haven't even used up half the fuel in this SRB, so there we go. Our apoapsis is over 18 kilometers. We're going to get there easily, but we do have to wait until this altitude gets over 18.7 kilometers, at which point we do a crew report. So just watching. There we go. Crew report. And notice I don't have anything to collect, but it doesn't matter. It still satisfies the contract, so I can just reset the experiment, and contract is complete. We can get rid of that, get rid of that. Now what we need to do, well, we're still on our way up. We're going to be hitting over 41 kilometers for our altitude. If I wanted to, I could have taken off some of the fuel and dialed this back, but I thought, oh, what the heck. I just wanted to show what this thing was really capable of doing. So what we need to do is to get ourselves back down safely from the edge of space. We've switched over to orbit view here on the nav ball. I want to keep this on the surface. So I'm keeping it right now just locked to prograde. If you get bored, you can definitely time warp your way up. Our jet engines, by the way, flamed out long ago. In fact, I should just kill the throttle right now. In fact, I could have, once I turned on the SRB, I could have killed the throttle for the jet engines because aren't doing anything anymore. Once you get them above, once they get into the upper atmosphere, they're certainly no longer effective. And in fact, they have flamed out from lack of oxygen. So I'm just keeping this locked onto prograde for now as we dive down. But what I do want to be a bit conscious of is my speed. And to facilitate not having so much speed, I'm going to pitch up to about negative 45 degrees. Make sure the blue part of the nav ball, you can see the blue part here, is up. So if you need to roll your craft so that the blue part is up, do so. I'm starting to get some resistance now. This thing just wants to pitch down. But these aerodynamic control surfaces aren't doing much in this upper part of the atmosphere. Now what I'm doing here, I'll put this on here, I am pitching hard up, as hard as I can, because we most certainly want to get ourselves out of this dive. Let's put this back on terrain. And still pitching up hard as I can. And slowly I'm going to be pulling this prograde vector towards the horizon. That is my only goal. Pull it. Okay, there we go. And once I am close to the horizon, I can start turning towards the KSC, which is to the south of us. I can also start giving myself a little bit of throttle. Don't be too aggressive in your turning. You don't want to get too far from the prograde vector. That puts a lot of stresses on these, especially the wings. You might end up ripping them right off if you're too aggressive with all this. As long as you stay close to prograde, you're okay. And you don't have to take this back to the KSC. You can land this wherever you want and recover. Just a quick reminder though that these early game landing gear are very spindly and very fragile, especially when you're landing on rougher terrain, so be careful. Quick save well ahead of time so that you can revert if things go badly, and get that speed down. You don't want to be much above the stall speed of your craft, which for this one's not much above about 50 meters per second. Landing at a high speed is a guaranteed way to have things go badly. But with this flight now complete, let's take a look at a second way that we can tackle these kinds of contracts. And once again, we're going to start with a previous vessel. This vessel here is the vessel I used in my first getting to orbit video way back. It's relatively low tech. We're going to use this to do some of these more far away, getting above a certain altitude contracts. If I go into map view here, you can see I actually have, what do we got? 7 waypoints for me to hit. They're spread out. Some of them are reasonably close by. Some of them are a little bit further away. And one thing you can do is you can knock these off one at a time. I don't think this is the most efficient way to do it, but it does work, especially if you have only 1 or 2 to hit. You can do that. So if I go to the closest one here, which is, what is this, Zone 8LB-N, I have to do a crew report above that certain altitude. I can say activate that navigation. I can see that it is towards the north and the west. So all I have to do is take this rocket, Let's put SAS on, throttle up, and head towards the north and the west, which on the nav ball, this 270 is west, this is north, so at about 315. So I'm just going to punch it, and we're off. And this vessel is certainly overbuilt for this. I definitely want to emphasize that. Let's see, we'll get to about 50 meters per second. We'll start pitching in that direction. But since it was kind of lying around, as it were, I thought, well, why not just simply head off that way here. I'm going to take it off of SAS, just let the natural aerodynamics take it, and I can just begin to see the waypoints starting to appear. And what I need to do, whoop, just lost our SRBs, is I want this waypoint to be lined up with that. That's pretty close there. Looking along this longitudinal line here, I would like the prograde vector to end up over top of the the little icon here. We can keep an eye on our apoapsis here. We can keep our apoapsis. Let's actually keep our apoapsis pretty close by. I'll reduce throttle a little bit. This is why I upgraded the tracking station, so I have this time to apoapsis. Well, one of the reasons anyway. And keep that apoapsis really close by, so you don't end up going super high into space when all we need to do is be above 18. As long as you keep that apoapsis ahead of you, you're fine for this mission. And of course this thing's capable of getting into orbit, so this is kind of an overkill, but it'll easily be able to get over 18 kilometers if you want to try to build something a little smaller and save yourself a little cash. By all means you can do that. We are there. Let's do a crew report. And there we go. Okay, and we got the notification that we did do that part of the contract. We can cut our throttle at this point. Pretty close to apoapsis. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stage and spin this around in a retrograde direction. And also, yeah, we'll get ready on those parachutes too. We can take the SAS off. And all of that, we only knocked off one. We still have like 3 more this way and 3 more over here. And like I said, this rocket, you can pick them off one at a time, but you gotta know there's a better way to do this. So what I would like to do is put myself into a polar orbit. This is an orbit with an inclination of 90 degrees that will go over both the north and the south pole of Kerbin. And as Kerbin rotates, every point on Kerbin's surface will end up coming below our orbit. So if we put ourselves just into a single orbit and just simply wait, all 6 of those remaining waypoints will end up coming below us. And yes, we're in orbit. We are a lot higher than about 18 kilometers, but the game doesn't care how much above you are as long as you are above. Now, to get into polar orbit, let's take a look at the amount of vacuum delta V this rocket has. This rocket has 4,052 meters per second of vacuum delta V. And to be quite honest, if you fly carefully, that should be enough for you to be able to do it. But this being a tutorial, I want to increase this a couple of hundred more at least. So we're going to do something really, really simple. This rocket does not require these materials bays anymore, so we're going to take those off and simply do that and see what that does for us. And taking off that weight has now got us up to almost 4,400 meters per second of vacuum delta V. That is more than enough to get into a polar orbit. Now, with that all done, there's one thing we do have to be careful about. Take a look at those contracts. This one requires doing crew reports, which is perfectly fine, but this one requires doing a temperature survey. Well, in order to do that, I need to have a thermometer. So always make sure you do have the equipment that is required in order to complete the contracts. But with that, we are ready to go. We talked a couple of episodes about going into an inclined orbit, so I'm not going to go into that in detail. In fact, this is going to be an easier insertion than that previous one. Here we're shooting for an inclination of 90 degrees. Now, that means 90 degrees from east, and you can go in one of 2 directions. You can go 90 degrees to east, which means going to the north, which is this direction, or you can go towards the south, which is that direction. Completely up to you. It makes absolutely no difference. I'm going to go to the south, so that I will be dropping my boosters into the ocean over here, as opposed to, I don't know, on someone's house, I suppose. That might be in that direction. But if you would rather bombard this area, then by all means go that way. But all we're going to do is put on SAS and throttle up and get ready to go. Now keep in mind, if I put this on orbital view, I already have some orbital velocity of 175 meters per second, and that of course is in an eastward direction. So I actually have to pull that prograde vector towards either south or towards north. So that means I actually need to go a little bit west of south or north. I'm going to go south. So a little bit west of south. South is 180 degrees straight up on the nav ball. So I'm going to go a little bit past 180 degrees, maybe in around the 190 degree range. It doesn't have to be super precise. We can adjust as we go. All right, let's punch it. And as we head off on the mission, I want to take this opportunity to welcome aboard my most recent Patreon patrons, Roger L. and Ben. And if you want to join this most illustrious group and support this channel, there are of course links down there in the description, or you can just simply hit that join button to become a YouTube member. Either way, supporting this channel and ensuring that videos like this one continue to come out on a regular basis. Back to the flight, we're at a heading here of 193 degrees. And you can, if you want to, since I upgraded the tracking station, you can click on this second tab and keep track of your inclination as well as your apoapsis. Both are useful to watch. And as this closes in on 90, I'm going to come closer and closer to the 180 line, with the idea of when this is at 90, I will be right at the 180. How are we doing? Oh, our throttle down here. Our time to apoapsis is about a minute. And we are now closing in on an inclination of 90 degrees. 189.8, 189.9, and there we are, 90. Put that right at a heading of 180 now, and that should keep it right at 91. And with our inclination now well in hand, let's cut up to the conclusion of our orbital insertion. Alright, 80 by 80 or close enough. We are now in this nice polar orbit. And not only as Kerbin rotates will all of these waypoints end up going below us as well, every biome on Kerbin will be coming below us. So if you have not collected EVA reports over things like the ice caps and the tundras and things like that, you might as well take advantage of this now and knock some of those off at the same time. Getting back to the contracts, all you got to do now for this one is keep time warping, and eventually each of those waypoints will pass below you as Kerbin rotates underneath your orbit. That being said, Kerbin rotates fairly quickly, and the frustrating thing you're going to discover is that often the waypoint will pass below your orbit when you are not there. That's okay, you can just catch it the next time around. Every Kerbin day, each waypoint will pass under your orbit twice, so you will keep getting opportunities. You just gotta keep at it until you finally get it. And speaking of these opportunities, I think I see my first one coming here. Don't think we're close enough to this one, but are we gonna be close enough to that one? I want to be ready to do my crew report. Yes, we are entering in, so go to here, quickly do a crew report. There's no reason to keep it. This one especially being that there's no science associated with it. So 1 down, 5 to go. And as Valentina continues to orbit Kerbin looking for those other 5, why don't I take this opportunity to go over the main takeaways from this episode. We looked at 3 low-tech solutions to doing a high-altitude Kerbin survey. The first simply involved putting a small SRB on the back of a plane. This technique is great if you only have a single waypoint to hit and it is not too far away from the KSC. Method 2 was performing what is essentially a suborbital launch. This technique can get to further waypoints much more quickly, but again, you can only bang them off one at a time. Finally, I looked at inserting into a low polar orbit about Kerbin. allowing you to efficiently hit any number of waypoints in a single mission, but will involve a lot of time warping until the waypoints pass below you, which has the potential of getting a bit tedious. Speaking personally, these contracts can be a bit frustrating, as they begin appearing very early in a career game, often mixed in with similar contracts that are below a specified altitude rather than above, and doing the low ones are significantly easier than hitting the high altitude waypoints. Considering that around the same time you'll be getting more rewarding contracts that have you heading towards the moon or Minmus, it's understandable if you would rather give the contracts talked about in this video a pass. That said, you may have already grabbed one or two of these without knowing what you were getting yourself in for, and I certainly hope this video helped. But with that, as Valentina finally grabs that last observational survey on the 18th day of her mission, I'm going to be drawing this episode to a close. I thank you for watching and hope to see you again for the next one.